The Note 2 I thought at first was massive, then companies started breaking the 6-inch display barrier. The Note 3 pops on the scene and suddenly feels a little bit more comfortable a size in comparison, and executes performance, usability and features better than any other phablet. But this review isn't that simple for Samsung, unfortunately. If you enjoy the review, like it, share it and subscribe, then head over to mobicity.com using the link below and grab a new smartphone today. As familiar as a Samsung device is to spot, I actually feel they were kind of adventurous with their approach to the Note 3. They could have simply blown out the S4, keeping its shape and feel, and people would have anticipated it, complain about the lack of inspiration, but ultimately grin and bear it, because that's what was expected. The squared off Note 3 bears resemblance, but brings back a more subdued style, riskless elegance, and a retro business theme, starting at the fake metallic sides and ending with the fake leather rear panel. The elements look the part, give the Note 3 a level of masculinity, and define it as the flagship business phone for the intense user. It's a shame it doesn't feel that way. The fake leather is actually a nicer sensation in hand than the old slimy plastic. It looks convincing with a seam running around the device, and it seems to flow and contour elements of the chassis, but it lacks the depth of real leather, and the panel peels away cheaply, and the retro groove sides aren't as appealing as the ones found on the S4. The front panel is pure class, bound in glossy metallic highlights, brushed aluminium look coming through the Gorilla Glass 3, and a thin bezel allowing for just enough space for the physical home button and capacitive buttons either side. The unlock and volume rocker were perfectly situated with plenty of distinction and a solid click when depressed. The base sees a large space for the new micro USB version 3.0 and the revamped S Pen, which can now be inserted back into the device from either side as the pen is now uniform front to back in design. The rear camera very obviously protrudes, and this is a little deja vu S2, but once again, really draws the Note lineup away from the Galaxy S line, and that I appreciate. It ultimately fits reasonably considering size. It's still very thin at 8.3mm, and the thin bezels allow it to be as narrow as possible, and while it's achievable in a single hand, 2 with the S Pen is still kind of the best approach, and that's the point of the Galaxy Note, isn't it? The other point is that you get the highest spec phone to arrive at this time, and that comes with 3 gigs of RAM, united with a quad-core 2.3GHz CPU in the Snapdragon 800 variant with LTE, or Samsung's Exynos Octa chipset lacking LTE. Performance is leading the pack. Benchmarks situated the Note 3 as such, and I failed to generate any lag or jitteriness, which is usually attributed to the TouchWiz UI. And 3 gigs of RAM is looking to be a heavily required feature in upcoming flagships, because Samsung leaves no stone unturned in the UI customization, and that draws heavily on the device's fluidity. Call quality was superb, speaker loudness appropriate, and data speeds consistent over LTE or Wi-Fi 802.11ac, and you're not short of connectivity options or sensors either. Bluetooth 4.0, NFC, infrared port, accelerometer, gyro proximity sensor, gesture sensor, compass, barometer, thermometer, and humidity sensor. Internal storage comes in a range of 16, 32, or 64 gigs, expandable by microSD by another 64. As a gaming device, the Adreno 330 GPU and the display delivers impeccable function. They also bumped the battery slightly to a 3200 mAh. It returned a solid day and a half of moderate usage and excellent standby time while I slept. It's even charged faster thanks to the micro USB version 3.0. Be it a little massive and not fitting with the generational trend of making things more compact, but it is twice as fast at charging than a version 2.0 cable, being able to supply a 900 mAh current as opposed to a 500 mAh current, and equally impressive data transmission speeds, so long as you aren't limited by disk RPM and read-write speed as many will be. A profound criticism of the Note 2, and probably the only reason I didn't want to buy into it last year, was its display. The resolution has been jolted to 1080p on a Super AMOLED panel across 5.7 inches. The whites are cleaner, brightness enormously enhanced, viewing angles some of the best around, and colours punchy, very punchy, but can be toned down. The accuracy of touch is spot on, given it is boasting the renowned S Pen and can have added function of use with gloves. The Note 3 comes with Samsung's less than restrained cut of Android 4.3. This carries a lot of the same bells and whistles you find on the Galaxy S4 from earlier this year. It's one of the heaviest departures from raw Android, with Samsung unnecessarily touching every aspect of the UI. The necessity is that they offer you the richest and most thorough device on the market. No stone is left unturned and no feature omitted. Every inclusion feels as though Samsung crafted it from scratch due to their custom appearance, and this makes buying into the Galaxy range unique. The customizations in the settings is obviously one of the richest parts of the device. If it exists, it can be modified, and you can end up with one phone and an unlimited number of OS variations. I was actually impressed that on first boot, the app drawer only had a single page of inclusions. Yes, they cheated and made pre-installed folders to aid this, but all the inclusions are there and for the better. Whether I use them or not, they function as they should, draw on previous styles, but with continued updating of some of the less familiar app icons, making the UI slightly more visually appealing each time, but still not as good as the raw versions. From the home pages, swiping up from the bottom bezel brings you the new integrated flipboard. This is to combat HTC's blink feed, and they did it in a more refined manner that is neither intrusive nor forced upon. I never used it on a day-to-day, to be honest, but forcing myself to use it, I see its merits. It can be news related, or swipe over personal or social. The segregation of these areas is something I adore, and the use and operation is seamless and fitting. The area that the Note 3 offers up that it's unparalleled is the S Pen stylus function. This was a winning feature from the first Galaxy Note, and since then, Samsung has crafted it into a necessary evil that I'm kind of now finding angelic. It still remains that many people won't use it. The phone is easily used with fingertips still. Most of the time I will say I managed fine without it, but when I did want to be a little bit more complex, craft an S Note, do some scrapbooking, copy notes and images from web pages, and drag them into emails and documents, it's never been easier than with the new S Pen. The button on the S Pen now launches Air Command, a semicircular launcher for Action Memo, Scrapbooker, Screen Write, S Finder, and Pen Window. All incredibly fleshed out and useful. The S Pen window even allows floating application use like what Sony offers. The magnetized tip is read off screen and helps move certain jobs along quicker with its recognition, and Air Command is extended here to give you more options in certain apps. The Note 3 can also distinguish quickly between air gestures with the S Pen and air gestures with your fingertip, quite impressively I might add. And that's the thing, you've got the S Pen and your fingertips. You also have hand gestures that aid operation, and your eyeballs that help control certain functions, or your palm. Not to mention S-Voice, that is getting more versatile and accurate. Still slightly struggling with Australian pronunciation at times. In multitasking, I always praise Samsung for multi-window. It is the best way to multitask out of any of the Android cuts. Simple jumping in and out of apps is held back slightly with the physical home button use, but running Twitter and Facebook together, watching YouTube while doing a host of other daily routines, the dual app use of chat on to drag and drop conversations, all great. There is still of course more that can be done, but it's one of the most rewarding and thought out processes, especially for the heavy user, and especially with a display that's as massive as this and the S Pen for care. I obviously love the display, so media playback is of course a winner. The loudspeaker is awkwardly placed and regularly obstructed in my use, but is plenty loud and with reasonable fidelity, but a point for Samsung to perfect. The choices for sharing and streaming is another reason I can't get enough of this device. I feel like in any situation I can showcase my media. The 13 megapixel camera and LED flash is a solid companion. It isn't best in class. The autofocus at times I felt was the tiniest bit sluggish and needed further from a subject than I've come to expect, but not a glaring issue when taking landscape shots. Adjusting the settings is simple enough, but not as graceful as what I found on the LG G2, but are as rich and the modes useful. I do note that a dedicated night mode is missing, but honestly, auto did just fine at night. The shots I got drew nicely on detail and gave very accurate reproduction of the scene, and that point of reproducing the tones of a scene is across the board. The daylight shots were fast and composed as I saw them in real life, and that's the most satisfying thing about this camera. In video mode you can shoot in slow-mo or fast-paced, and Samsung brings 4K video to the table. It's cool should you have a capable TV of ridiculous proportions to really see the difference. But zooming in while taking a video does showcase some of its benefits over the Note 2 and other flagships. The front-facing 2 megapixel camera shoots in 1080p at 30 frames per second and holds its own in reasonable conditions and poor in dim lighting as with most. Samsung feels the heat of expectation. They know what to deliver to keep people satisfied without overhauling as some feel they should. The Note 3 is the all-encompassing, all-inclusive powerhouse aimed at the serious user. It isn't built for the everyman or woman, it's built for those with intent. Should that be you wanting to bridge this tablet-smartphone divide and want the power and precision of the S Pen, which is the must-have companion of devices this large and up, by all means, the Note 3 is best in class. Help support the work I do by following the link below to pick one up from mobicity.com. I'm Kurt and this is KABOOtech. Thanks for watching.